What's up everyone, Jay here from Tap and Turn Gaming, coming at you today with an EDH deck tech. A deck tech for a deck that I just recently finished building, and it is for this guy right here, Mazirek, Kraul Death Priest. So he's a 5-cost 2/2 legendary insect shaman. He has flying and a pretty potent ability. His ability was really something that drew me to him and wanted me to build a deck around him. So his ability is whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It's a pretty backbreaking ability for your opponents if they don't deal with him. So this deck is basically built around self-sacrifice and also making your opponents sacrifice things as well to make your team a lot bigger. There are some little interactions too with +1/+1 counters, because he will spit out lots of +1/+1 counters on all your creatures whenever any player. That's another thing to note as well, that it's not just you, it's whenever a player sacrifices another permanent. Not necessarily just creatures, anything, any permanent, artifacts, enchantments, creatures, lands, whatever, you name it. If they sacrifice something on their side of the board, your team's going to get bigger. So, I really like him a lot. Originally, I was going to make a deck around Mirren of Clan Neltoth, and I know there are a lot of decks out there that run her as the general, and that was my original plan, but I really just was drawn to Mazirek, and I kind of wanted to go off the beaten path with using a general that's so heavily used at the moment. I haven't personally played against a Mirren deck, but I have seen lots of them online and such, so they're pretty rampant at the moment. But I decided to go with Mazirek because I like the color combination, I like black-green, and I like putting counters on my guys and making them huge and turning them sideways. And so yeah, that's more or less what Mazirek does, so he's my general. First up, we'll take a look at the land base for this deck. Pretty basic, seeing as it's just 2 colors. So first up, we'll take a look at my lands that produce black and green. So we have a Temple of Malady, we have an Overgrown Tomb, a Golgari Guildgate, Jungle Hollow, Woodland Cemetery, Llanowar Wastes, Golgari Rot Farm, and Hissing Quagmire. So those are all my lands that produce both my colors. Then we're into my my tech lands, I guess you could call them. Bojuka Bog for the Graveyard Hate, Ghost Quarter to get rid of those pesky lands that may be giving me problems, and not only will it destroy one of my opponent's lands, it sacrifices itself, so it triggers my general and makes my team bigger in the process. Grim Backwoods for some creature sacrifice and card draw, so fits right into this deck. Mosswort Bridge, the green hideaway land. High Market, another land that lets me sacrifice creatures to trigger my general and gain some life off of it as well. This card was actually supposed to be a Mirren the Moaning Well, which would have been a lot better for the deck. I just couldn't find one anywhere. I checked the Battlegrounds, StarCityGames.com, and other online Magic dealers, and I just could not find a Mirren the Moaning Well anywhere. But High Market for the time being is, it's not bad. It more or less does the same thing. It just won't gain me as much life as I would like to. But it's a good placeholder for now. Then we have Jund Panorama, Terramorphic, and Evolving Wilds to filter for the basic colors that I need. And then Blighted Woodland lets me pay 3 and a green, tap it and sack it to search for 2 basics and put them onto the board tapped. So a little mana ramp and something to trigger my general as well. And the rest of the deck is just basic lands, so we run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 forests. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 swamps. So that's the land base. Nothing crazy. Gets the job done. Next up, we'll take a look at my artifacts and enchantments. First will be the artifacts. I don't run a lot of artifacts. I only run 3. But the 3 that I do have are pretty nice. First up is Nim Deathmantle. It's a very underplayed card, I feel. You know, it's really good if you have that 4 mana laying around. Whenever one of your dudes dies, you can pay that 4 and then bring that dude right back to the battlefield and then immediately attach this to it. Also, this is a pretty nice combo piece with any creature that enters the battlefield and brings at least 2 tokens with it. So, you know, if you have something like my next card, an Ashnod's Altar, which, by the way, is a 3-cost artifact that lets you sack a guy to get 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. So if you have these 2 cards down and, let's say like a Grave Titan, which I do happen to have in the deck, he comes in, he brings 2/2 zombies with him when he comes in. So you could sacrifice the 2 zombies and him to Ashnod's Altar to get that 6 colorless mana. Then use 4 of it off the Nim Deathmantle to bring the Grave Titan back to the board, and then just repeat the process and you net 2 colorless mana every time. So it's kind of a little combo piece to generate infinite colorless mana. And then my last artifact is Birthing Pod, because it's really good and it's a sack outlet, so it will trigger my general's ability. But we can pay 1 and a Phyrexian green to tap this and sacrifice a creature and search our library for a creature card with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the sacrificed creature's mana cost and put it onto the board. So it just lets you chain your creatures. Really nice artifact. Next up, we'll take a look at the enchantments that I run. Quite a few, but they all serve their purpose pretty well. So we have Hardened Scales. 1-cost green enchantment. If 1 or more 1/1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, that many +1 are put on it instead. So basically just lets me put an additional +1/+1 counter on my guys when I trigger my general's ability, which is really nice. Then we have Retribution of the Ancients, a 1-cost black enchantment where we can pay 1 black and remove X +1/+1 counters from among creatures we control to give target creature -X/-X till end of turn. This card, I've yet to test this deck out in an actual game, but I feel like this card would be bonkers in this deck. The fact that you can remove the counters from among any of your creatures is really nice. So, you know, if I start triggering my general's ability a lot, putting 1/1 counters on all my guys by paying a single black, you know, I can remove 2 from one guy and 1 from another guy, or, you know, 3 from another guy to give something a -X/-X. So this is really nice to get around those Avacins and those indestructible creatures that you normally can't deal with. We have Evolutionary Leap, a 2-cost green enchantment. It's a sack outlet, so it fits right into the deck. Pay a green and sack a guy. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card. Put that card in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. So just lets me, kind of like Birthing Pod, just not nearly as good, but it's a sack outlet that will let me chain my creatures. So maybe if I have a creature on the board that I don't necessarily need anymore, I can throw it into this and then potentially get something better. Then we have Oversold Cemetery, a little recursion, never hurt nobody. 2-cost black enchantment. As long as I have 4 or more creature cards in my graveyard on my upkeep, I get to take one of them back from my graveyard to my hand. Here's Attrition, a card that I pretty much play in just about every black deck that I play nowadays. 3-cost enchantment, pay a black, sack a guy, destroy target non-black creature. So a sack outlet that will trigger my general and kill my opponent's thing, so fits right in. Awakening Zone will net me a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn on my upkeep that I can sacrifice for 1 colorless mana, so that fits the theme of the deck as well, because we want to be sacrificing lots of things, and by sacrificing those, we get mana off of it. Malevolent Awakening is another sack outlet that lets you pay 1 and 2 black and sacrifice a creature to return a creature from your graveyard to your hand, so nice little form of recursion there. Here we have Death Reap Ritual, a 4-cost black and green enchantment with Morbid, so at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. Very easy to kick this off with this deck, I'd imagine. Whether it be my creatures dying or my opponent's creatures dying, that will more than likely draw me lots of cards. Here we have Call to the Grave, a 5-cost black enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-zombie creature. And then at the beginning of each end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice Call to the Grave. This is really nice because it will force every player on their upkeep to sack a non-zombie creature. So that will just let me repeatedly trigger my general's ability. Here we have Mind Slash, another sack outlet. We can pay a black and sack a guy. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. Choose a card from it. They discard that card. You can only activate this anytime you could play a sorcery, but this card's very mean. It's some pretty serious hand disruption. You could definitely shred your opponent's hands with that. Okay, apparently Archfiend of Depravity made his way into my enchantment package, so we'll just put him off to the side. Then we have Grave Pact and Dictate of Erebos. Basically do the same exact thing. Whenever I lose a guy, everybody else sacrifices a guy. Just Grave Pact costs 4 and Dictate costs 5, but this has Flash, so auto includes in this deck. Then we have Perilous Forays, a 5-cost green enchantment where we can pay 1 and sack a guy. Search our library for a basic land, for a land with a basic land type, actually, and put it into play tapped and shuffle our library. So, this will let us fetch up either our basics or maybe our shock lands or our tangle lands, anything with a basic land type. This will let us get it out onto the board tapped. And it's a sack outlet, so, you can see the theme of the deck, sack outlet. Makes my opponent sack things when I lose things. Sack outlet. Everybody sacks stuff. When creatures die, I draw cards, but, that's not a sack outlet, but Malevolent Awakening, sack outlet. This generates creatures that I can freely sack. Attrition, sack outlet. Evolutionary Leap. The amount of sack outlets that I have really do make for some nice synergy in the deck. Anyways, to round out the enchantments, we have Deadbridge Chant, 6-cost black enchantment. When it enters the board, put the top 10 cards of your library into your graveyard. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose a card at random in your graveyard. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield, otherwise put it in your hand. So, pretty nice card. I like this card a lot. Yeah, it does mill your top 10, but, I have ways to reanimate things out of the yard or get stuff back out of the yard. But the fact that on my upkeep, this will essentially resurrect a creature right onto the board, or just let me take any card back from my graveyard. Well, it's at random, but at the very best, I get a creature back onto the board. At the very worst, I get one of my cards in my graveyard back to my hand. So it's definitely not a bad card. So those are my artifacts and enchantments. Next up, we'll take a look at my instants and sorceries. I only run one instant in this deck, and it's Putrefy, destroy target artifact or creature, and it can't be regenerated. I probably could go with like a Beast Within as well into this deck. Probably some other cards as well at instant speed. Just how the how the deck ended up being built. Only ran that one instant, so we'll see how the deck plays. If I want to add in some more spot removal in the future, I can always do that. But next are the sorceries. We run Kadama's Reach and Cultivate for that mana ramp. If you're playing green in Commander, you're probably playing these two cards. They let you search your deck for 2 basics, put one onto the board tapped and the other in your hand. Here's Victimize, a 3-cost black sorcery. Choose 2 target creatures in your graveyard. Sacrifice a creature. If you do, return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. Excuse me. So this card's really nice in this deck. Lets me, resurrect creatures out of the yard, and it's a sacrifice outlet for me. So I sack a guy, it goes to the yard, trigger my general, make all my guys bigger, and then bring those 2 creatures that I chose back to the board. So, pretty nice card, I like it. Here we have Barter in Blood, 4-cost black sorcery. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So if I cast this, and I'm playing a 4-player game, everybody's going to sack 2 guys, so that's 8 guys in total. So that would trigger my general 8 times and let me put 8 +1/+1 counters on all my creatures. So that's pretty good. Dark Petition is the only tutor that I run in the deck. I generally try to not play as many tutors in my decks as I used to. Not because I don't think that tutors are good. I mean, they let you find the card that that you need when you need it, if the situation arises. I just particularly kind of stray away from them nowadays, or at least in mass, because, it usually just slows the game down. And, sometimes you cast it and you know exactly what you're going to search for, but sometimes maybe you don't know what you're searching for, or you do know what you're searching for and you just can't seem to find it in your deck and it takes longer than it should. So I generally try to run only 1 or 2 in my decks now, just to avoid the stalling of the game. Here we have Siphon Flesh, a 5-cost black sorcery. Each other player sacrifices a creature, and you put a 2/2 black zombie on the board for each creature sacrificed this way. So pretty good in multiplayer. Will trigger my general multiple times and get me zombie tokens on the board. Here we have Reign of the Pit, a 6-cost black sorcery. Each player sacrifices a creature. Put an XX black demon creature token flying onto the battlefield, where X is the total power of the creature's sacrifice this way. So not only does it make every player at the table sack a guy and trigger my general that many times, I get a gigantic black demon with flying. Here are my 2 sweepers that I run in the deck, in Garruk's Wake and Life's Finale. This will destroy all creatures and planeswalkers that I don't control. And then Life's Finale destroys all creatures, and then I can search target opponent's library for 3 creature cards and put them into their graveyard. And then lastly, Curse of the Cabal. This is a really nice card in this deck. It costs 10 to hardcast it, but it has Suspend for 2 and 2 black, and it gets suspended for 2 turns. So when it's cast, target player sacrifices half the permanents he or she controls, rounded down. So if you hard cast this, it's going to hurt for somebody, and it's going to trigger my general probably a buttload of times. But if you do suspend it at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if Curse of the Cabal is suspended, that player may sacrifice a permanent. If he or she does, put 2 time counters on this. So what I really like about it is if I hard cast it, it's really going to hurt for somebody. If I suspend it, nobody's going to want to sacrifice half their permanents rounded down. No one's going to want to do that. So this would be a card that I would probably save for the late game. For someone that has lots of stuff on the board, or maybe everybody's got lots of stuff on the board. And if you just cast this outright for 10, it's definitely going to hurt somebody a lot and make your team friggin' huge. But if you do suspend it, you can kind of play that little these little mind games with people where they're like, well, I don't want that to kick off and potentially target me, so I'll sacrifice something just to throw 2 time counters on it to stop it from being cast, but in the process, they're slowly making my creatures bigger. If my general's out on the board. So I like this card a lot in this deck. So those are the instants and sorceries. We'll look at the one planeswalker that I run. It's Vraska the Unseen, 5-cost Golgari colored walker with 5 loyalty. Her first ability is +1 until your next turn. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to Vraska the Unseen, destroy that creature. So kind of a deterrent for your opponents to want to attack into her, because they'll just automatically get destroyed. Mainly why I play her is the -3, destroy target non-land permanent. You know, being able to basically blow up anything that's not a land is really nice. And then her last ability, -7, put 3 1/1 black assassin creature tokens onto the battlefield with whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. I generally probably won't ever really kick that off, you know, unless the game's getting really drawn out and I just want it to be over. I might kick that off and then maybe, you know, be able to swing in at somebody with it and just end the game. But generally, I probably won't activate that. It's mainly just the +1 and the -3. So, you know, I'll plus her up to, you know, get her up there on the loyalty counters, or I could -3 right when I cast her, and then, you know, +1 and +1, and then -3, and, you know, so on and so on. I just like her because she blows up non-land permanents. Alright, and lastly, we'll take a look at the creature base of this deck. So here's our friend Archfiend of Depravity that somehow made it into my enchantment package. But he is a 5-cost, 5/4 flyer. At the beginning of each opponent's end step, that player chooses up to 2 creatures they control, and then they sacrifice the rest. So, you know, if they have 10 dudes on the board, they have to choose 2 of them that they want to keep, and then the rest get sacrificed, which is the key. So, you know, not only does it wipe your opponent's board of all but 2 of their creatures, those creatures are getting sacrificed, which will trigger my general. Here we have Nylea, God of the Hunt, the green god from Theros, blah blah blah, she's indestructible and she's not a creature unless your devotion to green is blah blah blah, whatever. I just like her because she gives my team trample, so if I'm making my creatures huge with my general, putting 1/1 counters on them, why not give them trample and probably make it so that they'll deal some trample damage. And she has a another ability where you can pay 3 and a green and give a creature a +2/+2 until end of turn. Here we have Solemn Simulacrum. Everybody knows what he does when he comes in. Search for a basic, put it onto the board tapped. When he dies, draw a card. Reaper from the Abyss, a 6-cost, 6/6 flyer with Morbid. So at the beginning of each end step, if a creature died this turn, destroy target non-demon creature. So, you know, you do see a few demons in Commander. Probably a lot if you're playing against someone that's playing a Kalia deck, but, you know, this guy will probably consistently be triggered and let me destroy one of my opponent's threats. Granted, it's not a demon. Hell's Caretaker. Sorry, the camera's focusing there. 4-cost 1/1, where we can tap him and sack a creature to bring a creature back from our graveyard to the board, but we can only activate this during our upkeep, which is fine. So not only does it let me sack a guy and trigger my general, it lets me get a guy back onto the board from my graveyard. Here's Grave Titan, 6-cost 6/6 with Death Touch. He's the zombie token generating machine that everybody knows and loves. When he comes in, he brings 2 of them. When he attacks, he brings 2 of them. Here's Hangerback Walker, a artifact creature. He's a 0/0, but he has the double X mana cost, so he enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. So essentially, whatever you dump into the X cost, it gets cut in half, and that becomes his power. So if you dump 4 into him, he comes in as a 2/2. If you dump 2 into him, he comes in as a 1/1. And when he dies, you put a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token flying onto the board for each 1/1 counter that was on him, and then you can pay 1 and tap him to put a 1/1 counter on him. Probably won't be putting too many on him with his own ability. My general will be putting lots of counters on him, and then you know, I can use him to sacrifice away to something to trigger some sort of effect, and then we can get lots of 1/1 flyers on the board. Here we have Merciless Executioner, 3-cost 3/1. When he comes in, each player sacrifices a creature, so just a way to trigger a mass sacrifice to trigger my general a lot. Is Karazda Guildmage, 2 cost 2/2. We can pay 1 a black and a green to give a creature +1/+1 and intimidate. Then we can pay 2 a black and a green, sacrifice a non-token creature, and we get X/1/1 green sapling creature tokens onto the board, where X is the sacrifice creature's toughness. Sakura Tribe Elder, everybody knows what he does. Sack him to search for a basic and put it onto the board tapped. Eternal Witness, everybody knows what that does. If you're playing green, you're probably playing that. Let you take any card back from your yard. Fleshbag Marauder, just another, basically a Merciless Executioner, just not named Merciless Executioner. Makes everybody sack a guy when he comes in. Yavimaya Elder, 3 cost 2/1. When he is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, or when he dies, you may search your library for 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle. Then we can pay 2 and sacrifice him to draw a card. So he sacrifices himself, which triggers my general, which lets me draw a card, which lets me search for land. So he fits right in. Corpsejack Menace is a 4 cost 4/4. 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control. Twice that many get put on it instead, so he fits right in for sure. So every time I trigger my general, instead of all my creatures rather getting 1 counter, they get 2. Disciple of Bolas lets me sacrifice another creature when he comes in, and then I gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the creature's power that I sacrificed. So lets me sack guys, trigger my general, and draw cards and gain life. Here's Gerard Golgari Lichlord, 4 cost 2/2. He gets +1/+1 for each creature card in my graveyard. And then we can pay 1 a black and a green, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power, and then we can also sacrifice a swamp and a forest to get him back from our graveyard to our hand. Probably never going to activate that. I'm not a fan of sacrificing my own lands unless I'm playing my Titania deck, because that's what that deck wants to do. But the fact that he lets us sacrifice creatures and drain every opponent at the table, that's basically why he's in there. He's really good. Here's Mirren, the creature that I was going to build this deck around, but decided to go with Mazirek instead. But she's no joke. She's really good. A 4 cost 3/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. Then, at the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return it to the battlefield, otherwise put it in your hand. So, this is, out of all the new commanders that give you the experience counters, this one's probably the easiest to trigger. So, every time one of my guys dies, she gets me an experience counter. And then on my upkeep, if I have 6 experience counters, I can resurrect a creature out of my graveyard with converted mana cost 6 or less. And then if I don't meet that, it simply goes back to my hand. So she's just all around good. At the very best, she resurrects a guy out of your yard right back onto the board. At the very worst, she takes it back to your hand, which is a win-win. Here's Reaper of the Wilds, 4 cost 4/5. Whenever another creature dies, scry 1. So that's going to let me filter my top card and let me keep it on the top, or tuck it to the bottom if I like. Then we can pay a black to give it Death Touch, or pay 1 and a green to give it Hexproof. So it's pretty resilient. Here's Savra, Queen of the Golgari, 4 cost 2/2. Whenever you sacrifice a black creature, you may pay 2 life. If you do, each other player sacrifices a creature. Whenever you sacrifice a green creature, you may gain 2 life. So just some nice synergy when I sacrifice things away. Here's Fertilid, a 3 cost 0/0 that comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters, and then I can pay 1 and a green and remove a +1/+1 counter from him. Target player searches his or her library for basic land, puts it onto the board tapped, then shuffle. I like him because he lets me remove counters from him to basically ramp my mana. So if I have him on the board and I start triggering my general and putting counters on all my guys, I can repeatedly use him and remove counters and keep getting lands out. So pretty nice. Spike Weaver, a 4-cost 0/0 that comes in with 3 1/1 counters. We can pay 2 and remove a 1/1 counter from him to put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Not going to use that too often. The reason why I like him is that we can pay 1 and remove a counter from him, and creatures deal no combat damage this turn, so we can fog, essentially. So if I'm rapidly triggering my general and putting counters on all my guys, I can pretty much fog all day long with that guy. Acidic Slime, everybody knows what he does. Blows up an artifact, enchantment, or land when he comes in, and he's a 2/2 with Death Touch. Phyrexian Plague Lord, a 5-cost 4/4 that I can tap and sacrifice to give something a -4/-4, or I can sacrifice a creature to give target creature -1/-1. So a sack outlet that gives creatures --, that, you know, gets around indestructibility and all that stuff that nobody likes to deal with. Sidisi Undead Vizier, 5-cost 4/6 with Death Touch and Exploit. So when he comes in, I'm sorry, I think it's a she. We'll say it's a she. When she comes in, you can sacrifice another creature, and then if you do exploit a creature, she lets you Demonic Tutor. So pretty nice. Mikaeus the Unhallowed, 5/5 with Intimidate. Whenever a human deals damage to you, it gets destroyed. And then other non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. So when a creature undies, it goes to the graveyard, then immediately comes back to the board with a +1/+1 counter on it if it didn't already have a +1/+1 counter on it. So it may be a little counterintuitive, I guess, if I have my general out and I'm putting +1/+1 counters on guys. But I do have ways to strip those counters off of the guys to be able to trigger his Undying. But, you know, maybe I don't have my general out on the board and, you know, I get Mikaeus down. He'll definitely be a pretty good machine to get repeated sacrifice triggers going on some of my other stuff. And, you know, if I sacrifice, you know, let's say like a Sidisi, maybe I exploit herself and Demonic Tutor, and then she'll immediately come right back, and then I can do it again. So, Mikaeus, I like him. Here's Namada Grove Guardian, 6-cost 4/5, where you can pay 2 and a green to put a 1/1 green sapling on the board. Then we can sacrifice a sapling to give all saplings +1/+1. Just basically there for the token production, but, you know, we can also make our saplings bigger with her as well. But we probably won't really need to do that because Mazirek will put counters on all my things anyways, but token generation and a free sack outlet to trigger that ability on my general. Triskelion, 6-cost 1/1. He comes in with 3 1/1 counters, and we can remove a 1/1 counter from him to deal 1 damage to target creature or player. So with the amount of things that are going to be sacrificed across the table, he'll probably get more counters off my general that I can use to remove to deal damage. Eater of Hope, 7-cost 6/4 flyer. Pay a black, sacrifice another creature, regenerate him, or we can pay 2 and a black, sacrifice 2 other creatures to destroy target creature. So, you know, 2 sack outlets on one guy is pretty nice. Here's Pentavis, 7-cost 0/0. He comes in with 5 1/1 counters. We can pay 1 and remove a 1/1 counter from him to get a 1/1 colorless Pentavite artifact creature with flying onto the board, and then we can pay 1 and sacrifice a Pentavite to put a 1/1 counter on him. So I like him because I can remove the counters from him to get 1/1 flyers if I need something to block another creature with flying. And, you know, with my general out on the board, he'll get pretty big, and I can use that to get lots of 1/1 flyers. Here's It That Betrays, a 12-cost 11/11 Eldrazi with Annihilator 2, so when he attacks, the defending player has to sacrifice 2 permanents, so fits into the theme with Mazirek. And whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. So he's just mean. If I force my opponents to sacrifice non-token permanents, when they go to the graveyard, I get them on my side of the board. Sheoldred, 6/6 with Swamp Walk that makes everybody that's not me sacrifice a creature on their upkeep, and then on my upkeep I get to bring a creature back from my graveyard right to the board. And lastly, Ashling the Extinguisher, a 4-cost 4/4. When she deals combat damage to a player, choose target creature they control, and then they sacrifice that creature. So she's really nice. You know, she gets around creatures with indestructible, because you can choose the creature and then they have to sacrifice it. It doesn't get destroyed, it gets sacrificed. So, you know, that gets around Avacyn and, you know, all those annoying creatures with indestructible. Won't be able to hit creatures with hexproof or shroud, but I just like her because when she hits, they sack a guy, which will trigger Mazirek. So, that about wraps it up, guys. That is my Mazirek Kraul Death Priest EDH deck. So let me know what you think in the comments below of my deck. You know, let me hear some of your suggestions on cards that you would put in. And, you know, take another card out in place of it, you know, let me know. Definitely open for suggestions. I'm sure there's probably cards that I may have missed that would go really good into this deck. So yeah, let me know in the comments. Thumbs up the video if you did enjoy it, so you know to keep making deck techs for you guys in the future. And you know, by hitting the thumbs up on the video, it makes it easier for other people to find the video as well. And if you're not already subscribed to Tap and Turn Gaming, please crush that subscribe button. Derek and I really do appreciate it. So, this has been Jay with Tap and Turn Gaming, and this has been my Mazirek Kraul Death Priest EDH deck. Again, hope everybody enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff, and we'll catch you later. Thanks a lot.